Hey gamers, Olympia came out just last week, and the devs have been answering tons of questions about her and the game in general on the Nolt board. I thought it'd be fun to kind of go through here today since we haven't done it in a little bit, but this time I'll be shaking it up a little bit. In the past, I would read every dev response, and this time I've already pre-screened them all and I'll be skipping over the more redundant ones and just looking at the ones that are a bit more insightful. With that being said, let's get started. Our first dev response is to rework the short hop button to let Fleet get instant slowfall by holding the button. The player says, "Hi, I'm the OPF suggestion number 29 here, repeating a suggestion someone posted on a past version of the Nolt board, as it would solve the main problem I expressed in my post. Currently, Fleet cannot get an instant slowfall jump by holding down plus short hop through the first actual frame of her jump in the same way that she can get an ISF by holding down plus jump or down plus full hop. I don't see any gameplay reason for the short hop button to behave differently, so I request that it be changed so that all three jump buttons let her get an ISF by holding them with the down input. So this is basically saying if you have the short hop button mapped separately from your full hop, you won't be able to get that slow fall. This is intended to close the gap in ease of use, the instant slow fall aerials between a player who has bound full hop or jump button to a bumper or trigger, and players who have bound a short hop button to a bumper or trigger. They then go on to say, I can imagine how this change could be hard to implement, such as if letting the short hop binding listen to held inputs, which would make it no longer give you a short hop. However, I think it's worth changing. It seems like it would be the more consistent choice, and I feel like it'd make a huge difference for players like me, who try to pick up Fleet mostly with default controls, but need a secondary jump button that only does short hop. After all, instant slowfall aerials are a significant part of Fleet's kit, and one that has been recently buffed at that. I don't believe anyone in the cast would be affected by this change except for Fleet, though I could be wrong. I feel fairly strongly about this request, so I do plan to repost every time I see the Nolt board until I hear some kind of response, just to be sure it's seen. Great game, by the way, y'all devs are doing awesome." And then SBS responded saying it's not planned, saying, "This is not planned. Not because we don't want to, but because short hop is essentially a macro that is the jump button for exactly one frame in releasing. This is something that simply cannot be done, unfortunately." Which makes sense knowing how the game is made behind the scenes and that this is now a macro. I wasn't sure about that, or if it's just like a full separate input coded into the game. So that is a little bit of a bummer. Good news, however, if you are a Fleet player, you can always do this input the old-fashioned way with a normal hop button, and just input it to the short hop timings. So not all is lost, but it is a bit of a bummer that you can't use that macro for that. Moving on to the planned but far section of the Nolt board, we see add an in-game visualizer for control stick dead zones and sensitivity customization. The poster says, "I feel like I'm not alone in saying that trying to understand how changing your stick settings affects your controls without entering and exiting the game, until it feels good, and that can be somewhat frustrating. Even if a return to the character select character test screen seems to help with the issue. There are tools outside of the game to help better understand these settings, like on the game's drag down wiki, for example. So I think it'd be beneficial to players if something like this was added into the game, especially for more casual players. I really do agree with this personally. I have problems with my stick sensitivities. I side B a lot in neutral as Orcane. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that, if y'all have ever seen my gameplay. That's all a mistake, but I'm not really sure how to fix my stick sensitivities because I just haven't really ever looked into it too much." Dan changed it to Plan But Far and says, "We want this for sure, but it'll take a bit. Ideally, it'll be part of our big controller update in late 2025. That's really good to hear that they're looking into more controllers. A few Nolt boards ago, I made a statement where I was like, oh, I don't know any controller problems, and since then, I've seen everything that y'all have shared with me saying oh, this controller does not work, this sensitivity doesn't work, this kind of box won't work for me. So that's very interesting to see that feedback on, and I'm really excited to see what kind of accessibility features they add in that update. This one's pretty short, but it's partially addressed, and I don't think very many people know about it, so I thought it'd be worth going over. The poster says, more short hop button options. They say, please implement these options. Pressing walk modifier plus the jump button should get you a short hop, and 2 jump buttons pressed at once should get you a short hop, similar to Smash Bros. Ultimate. I really liked this in Ultimate, since it kind of made short hopping a lot easier to explain and to input to my friends who might have been newer, or maybe a lower level player who's going to my tournament, right? But SBS does say, the 2 jump option is already in the game. You just have to turn it on. I believe it's under the advanced options. And I think that's really neat, so if you're struggling with doing short hops, but you don't want to map a short hop specific button per se, this is a really great workaround where you can just press 2 buttons at once to get the option. Before we move on to the next post, it'd mean the world to me if you use my code LASTSTOCK in-game whenever buying items in the Rivals shop. It helps fund my online weeklies and my offline local events, and the support goes a really long way. Thanks so much, and let's check out Abyss skins. This poster said, Abyss skins should be completely or mostly silent. They say, might be a hot take, but I think the level 100 Abyss skins shouldn't have any voice lines, or at least just grunts and in-game victory screens. It just sounds really odd having shadow clones sounding exactly the same as the original character. Menace goes on to say, we considered doing that, but there are too many moves that have important sound cues to completely remove the voiceover for all of them. For example, without the voiceover, it would be difficult to know if Edelus did F special while off screen. We may look into other options in the future, but between no voiceovers and regular voiceovers, we chose to keep the regular voiceovers. I think this is definitely the best option. I know for a lot of players, they use the sound cues to kind of help them play the game and kind of like point out like what's going on the screen, even if you might not necessarily be able to see it. For example, if someone starts a smash attack, right, they might make like a grunt or a special sound that would like cue you into that, so you would know to shield necessarily before they made any like big movements towards you to signal that they were doing that attack. So I think that keeping the voiceover was pretty important. Moving on to our plan section, this player says, Olympia's Abyss skin unique stage entrance is missing. Just like Edelus' Abyss skin, which is still missing the stage entrance animation, Olympia's Abyss skin appears to be using her default stage entrance animation. It should be using the swirl effect just like the original 10 cast. We can see it via the arcade mode, and then they link it below. Menace has marked this as planned without a comment, which means the devs have definitely seen it, which I'm glad to see, but knowing that it works normally in the arcade mode means it should be just a pretty easy patch over to the player's skin, and it doesn't mean that they need to make a whole new animation or something like that, so this should probably show up in the next patch. The other plan section is Quick Chat and Lobbies. They say, I like the new lobby update, but I'm sad you can't use Quick Chat in a lobby 1v1 anymore because of it. Would it be possible to add it back for 1v1 at least? I think it would also be fun to use it in matches with 3 or 4 players, but I understand it would take some UI work. Menace also changed this one to planned, so hopefully we will get that feature back, and I'm really excited to use it. I really like using the little emotes to talk to friends and just kind of goof around, so I'm glad to see that's on the way back. That just about wraps up all the developer comments. However, I thought it'd be really fun to go through what players are saying in the most upvoted section, and peek at a few things that players have sent me over the course of the past week or so. Let's start here with Forsburn has lost his identity. The poster says, over the course of several major patches, Forsburn's playstyle has been pushed in a direction that many players feel is unsatisfactory, and runs counter to Forsburn's identity as a deceptive, cerebral character. Most importantly, Clone has been heavily nerfed multiple times, making it simply impractical to summon in neutral if the opponent isn't camping. And it is not uncommon to see Forsburn going entire games without summoning a single clone outside of escaping disadvantage or edgeguard situations. This has forced him into a playstyle that punishes players for trying to make use of smoke and clone to trick his opponents, and reward those who practically ignore his specials and play him as a basic sword character. Patch 1.0 Forsburn had an issue where players would constantly full hop, clone, and then fall with Dare or Bear to cover their landing, and create clone with very little risk. Additionally, he was very effective at walling people out with Bear, Dare, Down Tilt, and Forward Strong Cape, which was much stronger since the floor-hugging counterplay had not been properly developed yet by most of the player base. These powerful neutral tools created quite a difficult and frustrating character to fight, who was also mostly disinterested in any deceptive play. His neutral was addressed in several ways. The frame data of Clone Summon was drastically nerfed, Dare and Bear had their safety nerfed, the cooldown on Clone was heavily increased, Clone Pop was made less rewarding by making it auto-floor huggable, and F-Strong Cape was made easier to beat by also making it auto-floor huggable. The Dare and Bear nerfs were entirely justified and necessary, remedying both full hop clone strategy and some of his over-reliance on them in neutral. On the other hand, the clone nerfs were far too heavy-handed, and effectively killed using clone in neutral at all, not just full hop clone. The result of these changes is a character who is almost exclusively his normals to play neutral, walling out people until he lands a clean hit, which is extremely similar to many other characters in the roster, even in Advantage. Using Clone is almost entirely relegated to edgeguarding, which isn't exactly a deceptive use case. They say, we believe that nerfing Clone so heavily instead of focusing on his normals was attacking his 1.0 issues in the wrong way, and has further pushed Forsburn away from his sneaky, trickster design, and cemented his specials as more of a novelty than an integral part of his kit. I definitely can relate to this, because whenever Orcane had those nerfs, it felt like I was all the A button, and none of my B buttons, which made me unique, were really usable, so this is definitely a bummer. Especially with how dumb Clone's AI is, and susceptible to killing itself it is. This has been further exacerbated by the recent startup buff to forward air. Bear was already a very strong move, being a fast combo tool that links into itself and kill confirms, and now it's even easier to land, further incentivizing Forsburn to ignore his specials in favor of aerials. In terms of balance, Forsburn is in a pretty decent spot. The character is obviously capable of winning majors, though he's not so strong to the point of being overrepresented at any level of play. For this reason, his changes should not necessarily be aimed at buffing or nerfing him. Rather, they should attempt to dehomogenize him with the rest of the cast, and reward players for utilizing his unique tools to outsmart their opponents. An ideal solution would be to keep him at approximately the same strength, making his normals less powerful, in exchange for increasing the utility of his specials. To this end, one straightforward solution would be a near-complete reversion of the frame data nerfs on Clone, combined with nerfing the ability to throw out safe aerials and disjoints by nerfing shield safety, hitbox size, or landing lag, for example. Fair startup buffs should also be reverted in order to retain his weakness to being rushed down. These changes would make it more straightforward for his opponents to rush him down, hopefully incentivizing the Forsburn to use Clone and Smoke to fake out his opponents. Making Clone faster would almost certainly not result in full hop Clone meta again, due to the nerfs of his aerials as well as the long cooldown that was given to Clone. I do agree that keeping the long cooldown to Clone is necessary, because in the past with the 2-second cooldown, it felt like I would break Clone and then boom, Clone would be back again, It'd be like nothing happened. But I do agree, starting up Clone takes so long to get it out, and then once Clone is out, you're not necessarily even moving, your moves are a lot slower now, so you can't necessarily make a Clone, then land on me again, You have to make a Clone and then that's your movement. Now you're repositioning to play defensively because I've probably closed the gap on you and then killed Clone. So I do agree Clone should be a little bit faster just to make it a bit more viable. I will say Clone is very strong, especially if Forsburn gets a hit, right, and puts in a tech chase scenario. Clone can kind of cover a lot of that, where Force can stay out of your attack range. You have to hit the Clone, and then Force can get kind of whatever move he wants on you to punish. So there's definitely times where Clone is crazy strong, and then obviously using Clone in general now is just not good. So I wonder how the developers find that nice in between where using Clone is good, but then maybe it's the reward for using it's maybe not as crazy on a tech chase scenario like I mentioned. I don't know. I really don't envy the developers who have to come up with those solutions. Elu recently made a post on the Nolt board which I really agree with, and I think it's a really great solution to having new player problems. They say, add the character bio and playstyle blurbs into the game proper. The character archetypes and specials at a glance images from the Steam new player resource are really great, but they're unfortunately tucked away a bit and hard to find. I do understand the new player resources were created as a quick fix in lieu of the proper tutorials being implemented, which are in progress. But I still think having a section in the menus that give each of the characters their lore and general basics right there in your face would help a lot with new player onboarding. Maybe they could be in the extra menu? I really agree with this. This is kind of a quick glance of what they look like. It just kind of shows you the specials. It's super easy to understand. But I almost wonder, whenever you play the characters, in the little, training mode on the menu, maybe if you click, 2 buttons from there, or, if you click a button on the menu, it'll show you. I'm not 100% sure where they would put it. It would definitely take some UI and menu work, but this is a great, suggestion and change overall, and I think would really streamline the new player experience. Elu made another post that's pretty short that I agreed with, so we can just glance over it really fast, but they say, friend leaderboard for ranked. They say, the ranked leaderboard is awesome to have in-game, but would it also be possible to add a filter to see how you stack up against your friends? You can view it here through Steam by using the community hub, but I would really like this filter, especially let's say if I was in a crew, right? And I wanted to see how I stacked up against the players in my crew. I think that'd be really fun. Speaking of crews, I'd really like to bring back the last stock crew. We used to compete in Smash Ultimate, but playing in Rivals would be really sick, so if you're interested in that, drop a comment down below, and maybe I'll bring it back. This one's also a very small change, so I just thought we could glance over it, but they say, add the patch notes to be displayed in-game. I think an in-game menu showing all the changes, rather than a Steam redirect, would be great, but definitely not a priority. And then they also said it would be cool if you could see the direct changes too, like those GIFs of the hurt boxes before and after the update. Probably way too much effort, but it could be automated and it would be cool for sure. I really do like this change idea. I wish that more players were educated about patch notes and what was actually changing. I feel like a lot of people don't read patches and then they're like, oh, my character doesn't work anymore. And it's like, well, yeah, there's a patch, like what you're doing is not in the game, you know? So that's why I do make the patch note videos, just because I know like so many people don't like to read through them, so they like to like listen to something. I'm the same way for other games, you know, that's where that comes from. But I think having them in-game and a little bit more in your face than just on that like initial menu would be pretty nice, but I'm not a UI designer, so I'm not too sure what kind of nightmares that would bring up, you know? In a similar vein to the Forsburn post that we talked about earlier, Liam and Alkali, who's a frequent flyer in my weekly tournaments, y'all should check him out, wrote, "The Orcanes are sad." They say, most good Orcane mains want to drop the character. It's very tempting to just go pick up someone else who feels like they have a cohesive kit. The character doesn't seem like they make sense to play until you're insanely good at the game, which is why Plup and Marlin have him around. As someone who has reached Masters with Orcane, and been in active discussions with top players in beta and fellow whales in the Orcane Discord, here are the problems that I see nearly every good Orcane and myself having with the character. We don't have a beta tester that can point and say, this is a good Orcane solo main, who will provide unique perspective and advocate to make the character more dynamic. The top players who do play Orcane as a secondary, Plup and Marlin, arguably gravitate towards him for how heavily he boosts good fundamental play, via reaction tech chasing, quick normals, and movement, and outright ignore a lot of the tools that should make him unique, i.e. his specials. For the rest of us, we only stick with him because his movement feels great, and we realize we'd probably see far more competitive success by picking up a character who has more consistent kill confirms, has a game plan around their specials, can easily dictate the pace of neutral, and doesn't suffer the issues below. I will say before we move on, I really do agree with this point that like Plup and Marlin mainly use the character for like his good movement, since they can like use their fundies to kind of like abuse that, right? Which is great to see them play that way, but I feel like Orcane should be one of the more creative characters in the same vein as like Forsburn, right? Where it's like, their kits feel like there should be like more depth, more creativity to them. And then whenever you watch top players play, you don't really see that. It's a lot of like wave dash jab to like tech chase, or like even just like tech chasing, like because you have such good like burst movement, you know? So that's not like bad to watch, like it's impressive to see, but at the same time, it's not very interesting. It's like, okay, like you're using Orcane Wave Dash as your main tool instead of like something like Bubbles or like something more fun. You know what I mean? Moving on to point 2 though, they say, the character feels inconsistent. Moves like up throw, back air, and down air feel like they should lead to combos or sweet spots, and they will outright drop. Bubbles literally have RNG attached to them. There's no competitive benefit to this, only drawbacks to both players. Up tilt has a 0.85 hit stun multiplier on the strong hit that makes it awkward to combo with. Up air sweet spot angle is 83 degrees instead of 90, and its sour spot is 70, making it worse for its intended job of killing with other characters that have similar moves. I do agree with this. Up air is like really awkward to combo because it does send at this weird angle. My opponent has to like DI pretty bad for me to link together multiple up airs, or like be a lock spawn, you know? So I kind of do wish that this was 90 degrees, but I understand that the devs probably don't want the move to be too strong. I would kind of like to see it changed to where maybe it could have less knockback, but then also like be at a 90 degree, so it's easier to combo with, but also doesn't kill as early maybe. That could be a good change, I bet. They then go on to say, the nerfs feel tone deaf. The Nair nerf was intended to make the move less centralizing, but it's still the Orcane move, because there were no compensation buffs to actually make other moves better in neutral. Bubbles were nerfed early on, and they now feel like a very niche tool to use at a top player once players learn about floor hugging and shield parrying them, which is also affected by bubble RNG. A lot of players actually don't know this. You can floor hug bubbles and then parry, since parry is frame 3. So if you're hit by bubbles and you're at a lower percent, just hold down, you'll floor hug, and then buffer parry. They then go on to say, specials are underwhelming. Nearly every top Orcane agrees that bubbles are a bad mechanic. Nobody likes getting hit by them, nor Orcane likes hitting them because they're not great for comboing. Using them expends your most important resource, and you can literally get hit by them and floor hug to parry or shield parry them. The punishment for getting parried for using them is a fully charged strong attack at any range. Orcane's side B is incredibly slow, only slower move is Adelis's hammer. It's incredibly vulnerable. The puddle side B stuff was cool, but effectively does nothing to still keep your vulnerability window, so you'll just lose any move, and does very little for Orcane. When he does actually hit it, turning it into essentially just a recovery tool. We would love to see the move made to be more interesting. Up B has gotten significantly harder to combo into this game compared to Rivals 1 due to slide-offs, and is really just a last resort for recovering. But that becomes a problem when it can be easily punished on smaller stages, even when the opponent is on the opposite side of the stage. And yes, there are way more stages where that's an issue than we can get rid of with the Rivals 2 bans. Lastly, Droplet was nerfed primarily because of certain players really advocating against its combo potential. But characters like Rano, Raster, and Olympia have unreactable projectiles. That will combo the same, if not better than Droplet. I'm kind of mixed on some of these, right? I don't think that every tool that every character has needs to be great, right? I think the Orcane side B can just be a niche move, right? However, I do agree that Droplet was a little bit over nerfed, right? Now you can combo it, you can do Droplet into grab on bad DI sometimes, or on certain characters. But that's kind of about it unless your opponent really messes something up. Whereas characters like Olympia and Zetterburn, they still have pretty good combos off their projectile. And that's not to say that characters like Olympia and Zetter shouldn't have that, but it's weird for Orcane to be this character who's kind of positioned as a trapper character that likes to play around their projectile have probably the worst projectile in the game, right? It's just kind of weird where it's do the devs want Orcane to play around his projectiles and his traps, or do they want him to be more of a rushdown tech chase character, right? It's always been very confusing to me kind of what direction they really want to go with him, which kind of goes back into this point up here where it's there's not a beta tester that mains Orcane on the beta team from what I'm aware of, right? I could be wrong, but it just feels like they're kind of not very guided in their direction with the character. Moving on to point 5 though, they say, opponent CC and floor hugging makes his gameplay boring. The only Orcane normals I know that make sense for breaking CC are up air spike and multiple downer hits, and don't even begin to combo till later presents. It's fine for a character to be bad against CC, but when our only hope is to grab them and have to reaction tech chase off down throw or hope that up throw connects, then it doesn't really feel like there's any winning against this mechanic. I'm a little bit 50-50 on this because I do think that characters like Forsburn and Orcane were designed with CC in mind in this game. I think an interesting fix to this would be let's say if you gave Orcane more tools that couldn't be CC'd, right? I know that Fleet had a lot of her multi-hits made to where they're just not CCable, so the move will always connect through, right? So I think if they maybe gave him okay, bubbles can't be CC'd from down B, right? Then you wouldn't be able to CC parry them, which would probably make bubbles a lot stronger on hit. And then it would also give Orcane a way to open up a combo, right? And it'd be kind of interesting, just an extra tool to give him. Maybe they could give it to another option that's a little bit more risky. Maybe they could give it to up tilt, right? So it's you can CC the jab that would lead into jab up tilt, but you can't CC the up tilt itself if he just chooses to do it raw, right? I think that would maybe give him more micro plays and neutral, and make the character a lot more interesting. The commenter then goes on to say though, I think that's the most of it. Please seriously consider getting a good solo Orcane in beta to advocate for the changes that would make him competitively interesting to play for people who aren't literal gods. I think it would also make him more interesting to watch. Orcane right now is kind of boring to watch, not to self-report on my own character, but in 1 he's so expressive and cool, and in this game he's there, you know? They say, instead of just wanting to switch off characters constantly. Someone like Gravy, the melee falcon who climbed the ranked last leaderboard and notably provided tester feedback for the development of Smashbox. Personally though, as an Orcane player, I definitely do agree with all these changes suggested. I think it's really important to have players of each character on the beta team, right? And I would like to see some changes to Orcane, however, I do think that Orcane is a character the devs probably want to hold back, just because if he was over-centralizing in the meta, he'd probably be a little unfun, a little unhealthy for the game, so I'm curious to see how they kind of continue to balance Orcane going forwards. I'm hoping as more characters get added to the game with stranger and weirder kits, they get kind of more comfortable with the idea of maybe letting Orcane do like stranger and weirder things. You know what I mean? I can't imagine like they'll add in like Malo and Eliana, right? And then they keep Orcane kind of in this like scrappy, like tech chasey kind of character. You know, I feel like he definitely has one of the more unique kits, and I'd love to see the devs lean into that a little bit more for his character identity. I've picked out a few fun little suggestions to wrap up the video with this one starting with emotes usable mid-fight. I think emotes would be more fun if you could use them mid-fight. Sort of like how Smash Bros, you can set messages to play when you taunt by displaying them above your damage percentage. Maybe it could be in the same spot or off to the side under your username. Not all emotes would make sense, but most would. Especially the ones with animated icons. Surely, if they are unobtrusive enough in a safe series like Smash Bros, it can work here. Creatures of Ether is a similar comparison too, which shares many of the same emotes. I love using them mid-game after making certain plays and using the wonderful art as real-time reactions. Shout out Creatures, by the way. I want to host a bracket for this game. It's like so fun. But I totally do agree. I also think it should be this way for spectators, right? I think if there was like a tournament mode or something like that, because you can set that in a lobby, maybe turn off this feature. But I think it'd be super fun if, let's say, I'm in a free-for-all with my friends, and I'm out and I can do like the little angry hedgehog dude and he's like yelling at my friends, you know? Like, I think that'd be a lot of fun. So I really rock with this suggestion. I hope to see it implemented eventually. Or maybe even like a version of it on the like end screen. Sometimes I want to say like, good game, or like that was a good set to my opponent after the set's over, but I can't because we get put back to the main menu screen without me being able to say something to them, you know? So just a small change like that, I think it would make the game a lot more fun and interactive between players. For our next to last entry, we have Direct Stage Comparison. In Stage Select, it would be nice if we could press a button, say X, to highlight stages such that we could compare them to the new stage visualizer. Each new selection would get a color associated with it, around its icon, corresponding with stage layout colors and the visualizer. This stage comparison set for Ult, and I've seen this one before, but basically you can toggle different things, so this is Final Destination and Battlefield, but then Town and City, we see it's not much longer, right? But the blast zones are a lot different, right? So I think having that in game would be pretty cool. They say, thank you for your amazing game and hard work. I'd really like to see something like this in game. I don't know if it would need to be on the stage select screen necessarily. I feel like you could hide it away in the extras menu or like in a training menu, right? But as a player, sometimes it is a little bit confusing exactly what all the blast zone numbers mean, especially when like picking a stage, right? So let's say if I want a stage with a smaller ceiling, a ceiling height of 750 doesn't mean a whole lot to me if I don't know what the average ceiling height is. So I think having these visualizers really, really helps out a lot. I'd definitely like to see it added, and let's go and hop over to our final suggestion. This is from one of the older Nolt boards, but it was sent to me by one of the players who enters my tournaments a lot, and I actually really like this suggestion. They say, visual effect for no double jump. I tend to notice whenever I lose my double jump, but quite often I see people dying because they didn't notice and don't press up special in time, which I can't imagine feels great. I'm suggesting a system similar to the one used in Smash Bros. Ultimate. If you didn't know, every character has a slight smoke particle effect when they have no double jumps left, which would give players a concrete thing to look at instead of potentially burning either double jump at a bad time, testing if they have one. Here's a Twitter post showing the effect used in Smash Bros. I hope that links are allowed. We can check it out really fast. Basically, you see here, you'll see that Young Link gets kind of that like ghosty like effect around him. See that? It kind of looks like kind of spooky on this stage, you know? But I think it would make a lot of sense for rivals, and it's not too visually cluttering, and they could definitely do it in a way that like fits in with the rivals' art style. So I do hope to see something like this implemented in the future. I think it would be a really nice change. Overall though, that's just going to go ahead and wrap up our Nolt board coverage for this week. If you guys liked how I kind of restructured the video a little bit, I tried to streamline it a little bit more and get some more interesting takes that weren't just like dev response takes. Let me know if you like that though, and I'll see you guys all next week for the balance patch. Bye for now!